You're tuned in to Reimagine 2021, version 11, the #1 virtual crypto and blockchain conference. Coming up, our guest speakers look at the intersection of two of the most talked about things in the blockchain space, DAOs and NFTs.
What are some ways you see, the coordination between DAOs and NFTs? Like, how do they fit together?
I think that they go really well together. I mean, for example, I look at Pleaser DAO and the acquisitions that they made within the NFT space in terms of what they've collected. I really love what Friends of Benefits has been doing. I guess I've been mentioning them quite a lot because they're the DAO that I've been spending most of my time researching and looking at. But they basically released these NFT kind of in-house incubated series with artists, and they're always so supported by the community that, you're not needing to go from 0 to 1 for an artist who has not done NFT drops before, because you already have a community that's supporting and incubating this drop. So I think that's something that's an interesting relationship that I personally want to explore further. I also think that fractional ownership is something that's really interesting in terms of art, where maybe it's like, let's say an Andy Warhol piece, and maybe you can have 1,000 people own it at the same time. What does this mean? And I think a lot of that will have to come with DAOs and with the mechanisms that only DAOs can set up and provide.
What do you think are some improvements needed for the whitelist and verification process for starting a lot of these DAOs?
Oh, for sure. I mean, it's funny that you speak of whitelist, because that's a topic that I'm really interested in, because, before NFTs, whitelisting, I feel like, is not even a typically used word. You have blacklisting, but never whitelisting. And I think it's so interesting that now even that has been flipped over on its head. Within the past few months, it's become so necessary for any projects within the NFT space to be able to have whitelisting. And that's because, there's a crazy amount of bots that are starting to become very sophisticated in terms of hacking projects, in terms of finding source codes. For example, I was reading analysis about the timepieces drop and how the bots were able to game the system. So it's insane what people are doing in order to gain kind of like people with malicious intent, or how they're able to game the system and how they're able to influence a drop. So I think what's interesting too is how complicated a whitelist process can be. For example, for the artist DK Motion, he recently had a limited edition sell. His 1-of-1 was collected by Cosmo de Medici, an amazing NFT collector who's actually also collected one of our Thai pieces. But afterwards, DK received thousands of applications within a Google form application, where he's asking for, people to really look through his history to try to get rid of any bots. So this includes how many sales he's had on NFT Gateway and other answers to questions that you really need to research and know the artist well in order to be able to complete the type form. What we did, like I mentioned earlier with our whitelist, is a secret code process where we're asking people to be involved throughout the week to weed out people who, are just in it for the short term, to have really long-term collectors who are there for the art and love the artist to have the best chances at winning the work. But I've seen so many interesting whitelist mechanisms happening in the space. For example, a couple months back with Tom Sachs's Rocket Factory project, their whitelist was really just a badge, and they didn't tell anyone what the badge was for, and they were just like, oh, this is something that you can claim. The creators of the Tom Sachs Rocket Factory project were telling me that they were expecting a lot of people to come onto the NFT space and for Tom Sachs to be their first exposure to collecting NFTs. So the reason why they wanted it to be a badge is that they wanted people to go through what it's like to connect your MetaMask and to get something without needing to pay for it. But a couple of days after everyone collected those badges, they then announced that it was actually a whitelist for the project. So I think there are a lot of interesting ways and interesting games that could be played on the whitelist that can really enhance the collector experience and make the community stronger, because we have people in our community who are working together to solve the clues. They're like, hey, like, I think it's this, I think it's that. They're having a lot of interesting conversations among themselves. And that's something that, that's something that without a whitelist system, you don't really have. Bringing your question back into DAOs, right now, FWB still goes through an approval process where you need to send in an application and not just have semi tokens to be approved. And I think that's very necessary for any DAO, because ultimately a DAO is made up by its members. And so you want high quality members, you want people who are in it for the right reasons, and you want people, who are not coming in with malicious intent, because sometimes one or two person voice can be very loud and overpower a lot of other interesting voices. So I think that's also why whitelisting, or I guess in this sense, like approval processes for DAOs are so important.
So one thing that we're starting to see with NFTs is this ability for a holder of an NFT to be able to gain access into certain digital places. So let's say a DAO is structured in a way where you need to be able to have a membership. In that scenario, you could provide someone with an NFT and they become part of that club, part of that membership, and their ownership of that NFT that they can prove gives them access. And so, one of the things that we're seeing on Hedera, there's an application that's come up called Hash Squirrel, and it was a concept, the ability to hold an NFT to create spaces that are exclusive.
So are there any interesting ways you see DAOs and NFTs having close coordination?
For sure. I mean, we can see like NFT projects that are governed by DAOs, right? And they are the ones that control what NFTs come out, what utilities it could have. And so, yeah, there's definitely a lot of crossover and collaboration that we expect to see in there.
Can you explain what are the different categories of NFTs and where does the value actually derive from?
I mean, the value that we've seen so far is around just scarcity, right? Like, I know it's not really clear, but it's definitely around scarcity, but that's just a starting point. As I mentioned, like, these things will evolve, and the value could be getting some sort of revenue share for holding an NFT, or getting some sort of privilege in a club or a membership of sorts. So the value will definitely matter and change across different types of NFTs. So, the first step to that is just the artwork, and then it goes a lot more beyond that in terms of like what kind of utility use cases an NFT can provide, and the value would definitely be driven based on that.
So NFTs are expected to surpass the market cap of DAOs and their treasuries. Why do you think, what is the main pull with NFTs? Why are they getting so popular?
It's really early to tell. Both of these innovations are like in the earlier stages. And so to say that NFTs would surpass DAOs is probably a bit too early. One reason could be that people can relate more to NFTs, right? So it can have broader appeal and more mass adoption happening around it. Whereas DAOs are a little bit more technical, they're a bit more involved, and the infrastructure is still not as mature as we're seeing for NFTs. But if you look at it a few years out, it's really hard to say. I mean, I don't think they compete with each other in any way, so the market caps for both would be quite large compared to what they are today.
How do you see NFTs and DAOs kind of coordinating with each other?
Yeah, I mean, you could have DAOs that exist because NFTs are kind of the gateway into that DAO. That's an interesting model. I think before we get into the NFT and DAO perspective, I think the main point of caution that people are having, especially with launching large DAOs, is a distribution of power. If you have fungible tokens, let's say, and you have a token distribution event, whether through a sale or through an airdrop, you have to be very careful, because if you distribute too much to a small set of users and that project appreciates and that token appreciates, then all of a sudden you have that wealth disparity that we're trying to avoid, I guess, or trying to minimize, right? And also the power concentration. I think that's also something that is always at the top of minds for people who are building decentralized structures. But with NFTs, I think you're now marrying, perhaps let's take the culture side of things. Maybe in order to be part of this DAO, you have to be very passionate about photography and you have to wear that, or you have to basically acquire this photography badge that gets you access to all these different perks and community benefits, which also govern the DAO. So if you're a ticket holder, or if you're an NFT holder, if you will, then you have access to this DAO, and that's kind of like this, I guess the way you kind of know in the regular world is it's like a club. And you're seeing that with Friends with Benefits, you're seeing that with Bored Apes, and I'm sure a bunch of other bigger NFT projects where they're really trying to create this community, but also also control its quality a little bit, and making sure that's high quality, because if you open the floodgates too early, then it might dilute the culture.
I think what we're seeing a lot of right now is DAOs and collectives, like groups of people coming together and like investing in things, and using DAOs as like an investment vehicle or like an entity of sorts, where people can like acquire artwork, like group invest, etc. And I think on the other side of that, you can start having like creator collectives, music collectives, people kind of organizing these DAOs to either like further improve NFTs, release NFTs, like spin up, fundraisers around NFTs, and maybe social causes too can spin up DAOs instead of like registering as like a formal entity. I think a lot of the regulations and frameworks need to change and excuse me, and have clearer guidance, because right now it is a nightmare to legally and compliantly set up a DAO. Most of these DAOs are operating probably illegally or in violation of SEC or AML laws to an extent. But I think over time, once we have clearer guidance, I think DAOs represent an opportunity for communities or groups of people to come together and do things or set up like entities or projects. And I think NFTs themselves can serve as access points to these communities and groups. They already are through the PFPs and Discord channels and stuff like that, access to value, experiences, etc. But I also think like, these DAOs can create NFTs or like innovate on them, build tools and applications like the FWB community is doing. So I think they're synonymous, but also they can function kind of separately.
Can you sort of break down what are the difference for community incentives in participating in a DAO versus NFT projects?
So I think with a DAO, you can have, I guess, bounties or like incentives or rewards for people for completing certain tasks, like helping with the community, building, throwing events, like actually like coding or like developing like infrastructure for the DAO or like apps, etc. So I think on that front, it's cool because you can get paid out in the DAO token, like have some sort of inherent value attached to it, or maybe not. Maybe it's all pure speculation, or maybe you just want to be more involved and like own a piece, and like because you are so passionate about it, you want to have more votes, more governance power. And so I think those kinds of incentives are like great. I think with regards to NFT projects, it's a little bit different because it's not necessarily DAO focused. Like you can have like people collaborating on an NFT project, but you don't know how that's getting split up. It's like very like manual. Like you can say like this artist gets 5%, this artist gets 4%, this artist gets like 10%. The marketing company gets like 40% or something like that. And I think there is an opportunity maybe to like bridge these things with DAOs, but I think a multi-sig wallet in most cases would function properly. Or maybe even just like, I think the cool thing about like what we're building at DoinGud is we actually enable like on-chain, like automatic splits of collaborators. So you can have like middlemen, agencies, managers, like galleries, like 10, 20 collaborators, and you just set up what each is receiving from a single NFT, from a group of NFTs, and that's all paid out automatically. So you wouldn't necessarily need a DAO or like any sort of like advanced like entity for that, unless you were starting a project or a collective and you wanted a percentage of that going to a treasury, in which case you could have a multi-sig wallet as a beneficiary of the NFT sales as a percentage. And then that could go into the DAO treasury and maybe like fund future projects, fund legal, or like maybe just fund like a cool NFT NYC party.
Do you see any convergence between NFTs and DeFi use cases?
Yeah, I think one that's particularly interesting is that of identity. So the ENS domain names is particularly interesting. I see it's not clear to me yet how identity for an investor or a DeFi participant is solved for in a decentralized way. There are a couple of ways to be looking at this. Regulated capital looks at it today through intermediaries such as crypto custodians or centralized exchanges that do onboarding and KYC. But can we now, in the construct of DeFi, think about solving for that using NFTs? You know, absolutely. I think it's early days, but we look at this problem very closely, and I guess it's too early to say how we will end up, but we would definitely begin to see more of this technology being applied for that particular use case in DeFi.
So I think you're going to have a sort of a collision between NFT and DeFi in a really interesting way, in that a lot of these NFT users and creators are going to say, hey, we've got these NFTs, they're kind of sitting here, what can we do with them? And there's options right now. If you look at NFTX or some of the other platforms like that, you basically can take your NFT and turn it into an ERC20, which is what a normal token sort of we see. So you take the floor tokens, you can wrap them or fractionalize them and essentially put them into AMM pools. And now you can start generating fees. People can trade NFTs just like they would tokens. And this is very interesting because now you can take all those tokens, you can do yield farming on them, you can put them into Futureswap and create perpetual markets on them, so you can do leveraged CryptoPunks. So it will really, in terms of use cases, just as soon as those doors and bridges start to open up, you're going to get even more users who are interested in, oh wow, how do we take the NFT world and the DeFi world and how do I make use of it?
Yeah, as I said, like DAOs, it's pretty close. Usage, growing usage in DAO, then gaming, and then some mainstream things. Social networks is also one of the interesting fields because it's like it's all about communities, and social networks, they really like searching for either using NFTs inside, like Twitter announced this usage for NFTs. They're building some stuff around, and Facebook announced. So all the social media, they can understand that the value and either just trying to be ahead, or NFT will disrupt them, I guess, at some point. So social networks is one other target.
NFTs have surpassed the market cap of DAOs. So do you think this trend will continue, or DAOs will also grow?
Depending on how you count the DAOs market cap. It's like money that DAOs holds, or how you count
the social DAOs that exist out there.
Yeah, but how to calculate the like market cap for the DAO?
I guess the kind of like NFT projects are creating their own DAOs versus just native DAOs, kind of like the treasury that they're being governed.
So again, like for me, it's hard to say because it's depending on how we define this DAO market cap and NFT tokens market cap. So I don't know really how to kind of measure them.
Yeah, for sure.
I think for treasuries it could be any size of like amount of money locked, but for it's more about, I don't know, some new like ways to work with the capital, so you can move like a lot of money to treasuries. But for NFTs, if we're like counting trades, this is more about users and how many users, what is the users influx, and this is more about like bringing like mainstream audience, and so it's I don't know how to measure this actually.
I think DAOs is next, honestly. And again, NFT can be like almost a tangible concept. You can see like art as it exists now, or a physical object and whatnot. DAOs, so what has happened? Okay, so last year DeFi started to bring like a blockchain mainstream. Can't remember the total value lock like a year ago, or was like not even $1 billion probably, you know. And now we're approaching like $200 billion. So that's really brought things mainstream. You have meme coins and all this kind of stuff coming in. Meme coins, used to think they didn't have any utility, but they do, because they bring the general public into blockchain. And so, okay, so we're bringing people into blockchain now. And so with DAOs, I think DAOs and social is what's going to start this next year. It's really going to drive mainstream adoption of blockchain generally. And so with the DAO, it's so complicated. You know, a lot of things are probably legal, honestly. If you have different jurisdictions, like you have the States, you have like, you know, different countries in Europe, you know, different countries in Africa and whatnot, like, you know, they all have different rules on how things should be governed. So if you want to be legal, these DAOs have to address these legal issues. I think, you know, personally, that's probably like one of the number one issues, is figuring out how these things can legally operate. Because you can have a DAO and you can change the world. You can, you know, create the metaverse on a DAO, but if no one can like use it legally, like Facebook going to take over, you know, like, and so we need to get some of these things in place, like, so that like people can use it all over the world.
DAOs are very difficult. There are a variety of different sorts of DAOs. Some of the most well-known DAOs are the investment DAOs, that to get into it, you actually have a fairly significant barrier to entry. You have to invest, let's say it's $10,000 just to be part of it. The non-investment DAOs, the ones that are more community-driven, you don't have to invest anything except for your time and your energy. And some people don't have disposable time, and some people don't have disposable energy. I know I don't. No, but the goal here, though, is these DAOs that are working and focusing on capturing that enthusiasm to out-innovate and out-produce other organizations. You still have a massive human coordination cost. And we haven't quite cracked. There are a lot of tools out there, a lot of amazing things that are being done, but we haven't quite cracked the mental model that we need to work in a DAO. We've cracked what it takes to acquire, collect, and hold art. Like, that's been going on for thousands of years. But we haven't quite cracked this idea of, I'm gonna work for free in a community, and the community is gonna value my contribution and give me value in return for my contribution to that community.
Looking forward, what is that one use case do you think will be next for disrupting the industry with NFTs?
It's going to be social related, and it's going to tie into DAOs too. You know, it's going to be like, you know, as we know, like crypto wallets are super complicated, you know, for the general public to use. But there's solutions now like Magic or Fortmatic that have come out there where you can like log in with like your phone number or like your email address and like that. And so that's going to bring even more beyond meme coins and stuff like that, more of the general public in to interact with, again, like DAOs and NFTs and social networks. And I'm confident like this next year is like, and I know just from being like on the ground level, we have a large grant program at Conflux. A lot of social networks coming in. Like I'm not talking about like a Facebook or something like that. One very interesting one is called T Squared. They're like, I want to say like a collective medium. So people like create knowledge and share knowledge, and then they can they gain tokens for actually like, you know, interacting with knowledge, which is cool. And that's about the social network built around knowledge. And so some of these things are going to come out where the general public can interact. And I'm actually probably going to facilitate this class at University of Washington, like on T Squared, so the students can learn how to use blockchain social networks, and then they can create, you know, they can create via this as a new medium for creation.